There were rows of vertical things, dark and faint. The darkness grew, and the presence strongest in the south. The darkness that built was not so much of a vortex, but like scattered clouds. Something round was seen in the mirror. At times, it was like it had horns, and at times, like hooves. I stilled. Things quieted beyond what we can hear in the background. That was not heard. And it was clear from the semi-spherical, knotted and extended horn thing that this was some sort of Saturnal bull, but it wasn't quite as a bull. And I felt like from the very center of the tetrahedron that there was some communication that I did not quite get. And almost musical, well, definitely musical, but not so much human instrument in its manner. There was a movement in the north, and I felt it upon me. On my back, towards my hip, on the left, and my left foot. I was a bit fuzzy. And just like in the last operation, there was like something circular, and it was almost as if something danced on it. But it wasn't like hominid, and it wasn't like an animal. It was more like a top, I guess. But it moved as if that was some sort of clothing operation. Kind of reminds one of a whirling dervish. And this one, went through like that. It was whatever this mechanical thing was. It was, like a fist, that sort of size. Kabbalah operates with its sort of trees, right? And the Golden Dawn seemed to use sort of a color system, sort of secret of the tree system. And this seems to have been encoded into the system. And perhaps it formed something else that we don't have. It seems definite that it was intended to be developed into something, because to think about it, the Kabbalah, just like in Sufism before it, you have the divine names realm, you have the light beings, all those names with Al or Ya at the end. Well, not all the names, but you know what I mean. And we have the human realm and definitely all the other things that incarnate in matter, as one could say. So the clay being realm, and then you have the fire being realm. Frederick Adams talks about the tree of life as the nymph body of the galaxy, the pairing of the male and the female for the 11 spheres, and there was some sort of prejudice against the number 11 in a lot of European magic. I would think it would have to do more with how in Islam and Zoroastrianism they count, 3 spots, the thumb, and 2 spots for each other finger, and other 11-based mysticism. I didn't get Kircher's diagram of the Tree of Life before the Magic of Solomon video from the Church of Hermetic Sciences, the sphere within the sphere stuff. Even though that sort of stuff tends to be more detailed in the Sufi stuff, I wasn't exposed to that at the time. So, this, the Church of Hermetic Sciences, or Temple Astarte, is the source of where I first gained my understanding of that. Rosenroth uses, secret geometry in illustrating out the Kabbalistic principles. And when we look at the Tree of Life as being centered in a Pythagorean system of a triangle, we see very much we have 11 spheres as that central tree. And except for the bottom point, we have 12 rays from any of those points. Frederick Adams illustrated the whole thing by a goddess, you could call it. Well, not the whole, but in his diagram of the Tree of Life. And so a goddess flanked by goddesses, and you have that lion. Because remember, the old name for Palestine has the lion in it. Well, there's 2 variations of that name, but the Pla'ah, the great house, is the first part of the name. And Sut, Seth, Thoth, and then, the other variation where you have Per, Sit, or Per, Suth, or Per, Sith, or Per, Sut. And the Greeks rendered it into Plastina, to make clear that the whole thing had a feminine ending. We have in here A.E. White's version of page 8, which among other things makes a point that can be interpreted by saying, don't focus on the flaws of the paths of others. Focus on bringing out the light of your own religion. A knowledge lecture and a first degree opening is said to have been part of the manuscript at some point. And there's reasons given why they seem to be genuine. So page 21A, like much of it, is shorthand. You could say, well, I mean, most of it isn't really shorthand, but you know what I mean? It's, this is what needs to be explained and that sort of stuff. It goes through a system that includes some planetary aspects in part of it, and other things are given other aspects. And that knowledge lecture, there's also a 8A portion, and that 8A portion seems very sound in its ritual thing, and the part with the refrain kind of reminds me of Aleister Crowley's rituals with the knocking, and I have adapted with some people in the past some of that sort of knocking, and people tend to go, "Oh yes, it's Jafar." And when we look at stuff like this, we say, "Oh, was it a hoax?" It's like, well, it wasn't completely honest, but let's face it, the Zohar, the same thing happened. They tried to make the Zohar look like it was something from the first century of the Common Era, and it definitely wasn't. And the books of the Bible are sort of pseudo-epigraphical. Sometimes they're not. They just aren't the Peter, James, and John that people think they are. Because if the Gospel of John and the Book of Revelations were rewrites of earlier stuff in the 90s, and then the rest of the biblical material was from 120 to 150, of what they call the New Testament. Some of the letters, I think, may have been in the first couple decades of the second century of the Common Era. But the first versions of things, the Gospel of John originally was 19 chapters, and it ended up being bigger. It wasn't just transcription stuff. It was, verses were added, chapters were added, a lot of changes. And we know definitely by, just a reading of some of the books that the books of Moses weren't the books of Moses. The book of Joshua wasn't the book of Joshua. There are other examples. Certainly some stuff may be in there, but representative traditions are, sometimes the best that we can have, but there could probably be more honesty with it, right? There was the Madame Horus issue and the Ahathor temple. So some of the stuff that happened there, it wasn't part of the Golden Dawn, and, Mathers and such fell for it, but not everybody fell, but it almost, completely ended any validity sort of ideas associated with the Golden Dawn because of what happened there. But yeah, some things that were back in the day, yeah, there's victims, but then again, if your beliefs lead you down, oh, you're going to, oh, he'll really marry me, or it's necessary to join the group for me to do this. It's like, yeah, people learn from that sort of thing, but making it a legal matter, I don't know if I agree with that, but, but the case was what it was nonetheless. And Aleister Crowley, could you do Rosicrucianism from a perspective like his? I think you sort of could, but, your typical Rosicrucian wouldn't tolerate that sort of thing. There is talk about why you should probably either change something or include a note that, yeah, this was transcribed wrong. in some of these traditions, right? And there's some, talk about further publications and all that to consider in the end.